Good morning, everyone. Welcome to 50 Days to 50, my 50 conversations leading up to my 50th birthday. How many times can you say the word 50 in one sentence? I am delighted to have my friend and my state senator on the call with me today. So let's jump right into it because he is too busy to dilly-dally with me going on and on about what I like about him. We'll do that when he gets on. Please join me in welcoming my friend and senator, Tim Mathern. Hello, Tim.
Hey, good to see you. And it's wonderful to see the pictures of your life
Oh,
and up to 50. And I just think it's a wonderful time. I remember being 50 and becoming much more determined about my future life. And so you're right on that same spot.
yeah, I love that. So were you already in the Senate when you turned 50, Tim?
I was already in the Senate,
Okay.
but I took some time to really upgrade myself, upgrade my education, and I think I've applied it fairly well since then. So, and I'm sure you will too.
Oh, my goodness sakes. I would agree. All right. My mother's already commented. So, that's kind of par for the course. She says, boy, girl, you're in tall cotton. This is one distinguished guest. That is very, very true. I have known Tim since I was in my 20s. We were on we helped co-found a small nonprofit in town, which has gone on to do incredible things called Wellspring for the World. But what I remember thinking about you, Tim, when I met you was just that was a group of fairly wealthy, influential people and me. And you paid the same kind of attention to all of us. You never made me feel like, well, you're not writing the big checks that everybody else is writing. So you don't really have the same level of status. And to me, that's one of the most compelling things about you. And I know it's why you've done the work that you've done, both politically and in your professional career, because you are a true public servant in a way that I've almost never met anybody else who embodies that as much as you do.
Well, I thank you for that. I remember that time too. And I also remember the importance of making sure that the full community was involved. I think you didn't have the cash, but you
No.
had the values. You had the
Oh,
value of care for other people, and the values are just as important as the cash. Without the values, the cash is meaningless.
mm.
And so you were just as important as anybody else.
Well, that's kind of you to say. I certainly learned that was really the beginning of my nonprofit path. So I had never really had anything to do with them before that.
Sure.
And it wasn't too much after that, a couple of years probably, that I started at the Arts Partnership. So the rest is, as they say, water under the bridge, or in this case, water coming out of the ground in Africa. Tim, let's jump right into these questions because I know your answers are going to be meaningful to all of us listening. What did you know before you turned 50 that has served you well 50 and beyond?
Well, one of the things I knew was the importance of relationships,
Mm,
and that it is through our relationships that we have value in our life, and we have people to work on goals with and purpose for the future. And that it was really about 50 when I decided that I should have kept track with every contact I had in my life. In the earlier part of my life, well, so I get a hold of Joe and Jill and we work on this project. Well, we're done with that. So I take them off my contact list and I go with some other. I finally came to the conclusion everybody we get to know and we put it on our contact list, and we have this wonderful technology now. We should just always keep it. Don't
mm,
ever delete anybody. I don't care if you're getting along or not. Someday, someplace, that relationship is going to be important. So that
Mm.
would be one thing I started to learn at the beginning of my life, but I really confirmed it um, as I got into my 50s. So that was very important. Um,
I really love that. And you're right. I think with technology today, there is a seemingly infinite amount of space. So you don't have to feel the way you felt if you had a little Rolodex that was just bulging at
right.
the seams. But you're right. One of the joys of these conversations is when I sat down to reach out to people, I really tried to reach people from a long, long time ago in my life and people who I maybe have never even had a conversation with, but know in some kind of social media capacity. And then people from all spectrums across that journey, because you're right. The people that you knew way back when, or the people that you knew before you had any social standing or any position of influence, are the people who really helped you become the person who became the person who had social standing and public influence. And so it's a real gift to stay connected to all those people. I agree with you.
And they become your partners again. At
Yeah.
at some point, you may be working with them again, or you're going to be mentoring somebody else, and you
Mm.
can say, "Oh, by the way, this person and that person might be important to you." You know, the other thing I would say that I began to confirm when I was your age was the actual management of self. You know, you mentioned these nonprofit organizations. Well, these nonprofit organizations, you know, you develop a mission statement, goals, objectives, all of these things. Any important organization does that. And you and I have done those things. However, it's important we apply it to our own lives.
Mm.
What is what is what does your goals and objective list look like? And so I categorize it as management of self.
Mm.
You know, we're all involved in managing something, a business, a nonprofit, a family, or whatever, church. But we have to start thinking more, okay, what is the most important management? Well, it's ourselves,
Hmm.
management of self. So that would be another thing I would encourage that you think about
Yeah.
as you move through 50. I mean, you should have a statement, a mission statement for Dana Del Val.
Yeah.
And I don't mean for your arts partnership or your podcast, or I mean for Dana.
Yeah. Yeah. A personal mission statement.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. All right. I will take that challenge on. And the next time I talk to you, I will share it with you. I promise. Okay. Let's move on to the next question, which is what do you know now? And I think you've started to talk about a little bit of this, but what do you know now that you'd love to go back and tell your younger self, wherever you want to put your younger self on the path?
Well, the management issue of self, I would tell myself the keeping of contacts. But I would also um, maybe give myself a little grace for
Mm.
those early years. And, you know, there were times when things didn't go so well. And if I would go back, I would try to be a little more probably um, accepting of things that didn't always work out and see it more in terms of stages in life and development, and be less hard on myself
Mm.
for not doing this perfectly or that, and see it more as stages of development. And,
Yeah.
and so that there isn't so much emotional turmoil and stress in life, so that there's a little more what I call giving yourself grace,
Yeah.
uh, that I would do better now, I think, going back.
Yeah, boy, you don't have to give yourself grace if you never risk anything or never dare anything or never try something you've never tried before, because you're probably not going to fail at what you already know how to do. But if you are trying and not succeeding, you really do owe it to yourself to be as kind to yourself as you would be to many other people.
Yeah. And I that reminds me of the other issue is trying to figure out a little more about why people are a certain way. And, each person has a deep reservoir of experiences, positive and very negative.
Mhm.
And many people have really tough struggles in life. And sometimes that's demonstrated in ways that we would find it difficult to deal with them. And so that's another thing is just kind of being aware that there's stuff about each person that we don't know and we'll never know.
Yeah.
And so sometimes cutting a little slack um, is important.
Yeah, that phrase, "Be kind to people, everyone is fighting battles you can't see," is or that's kind of a paraphrase of it, but is really true, and, you have played an important role in my life also because, you have, been a guest on Daily Dose, not because you, have a personal connection to it, but because your entire professional career has really been in service to people who are struggling with mental health and addiction issues. So, for you to remember that piece, I think is particularly relevant because you are on an everyday basis seeing people who are at or very near their rock bottom. And that has got to take an emotional toll on you because it certainly did on me. And I only went through it once.
Sure. And our organizations have a life too.
Mm,
So it's really not just the individual, it's also the organizations that we deal with. They have a life that goes up and down, and
yeah.
sometimes things are going well, sometimes they're going pretty crappy. Uh, but, on top of it, we still have to have energy to continue,
Yeah.
um, you know, directing a path and encouraging a certain way of doing things. And so even when we see limitations or accept difficulties, we can't just stop there.
Mm.
Um, there has to be, I think, a movement forward and kind of a vision of where we can go. Um, so that's the challenge too. Giving grace, but not sort of becoming immobilized
Yeah.
because the
Yeah,
needs
that's a
are
great way to think of it.
because the needs are so great. Um, so that's a challenge, kind of balancing that, and
Hmm.
you've been doing it, so you'll do a great job as you
Well, I
move on from.
appreciate the encouragement. All right, last question for you, Senator. What have been some of the most joyful aspects you have encountered since turning 50?
For me, one has been the development of my grandchildren. So family developments have been very joyful. Um, and being able to accomplish things in organizations that um, there's some fruition on that I worked on for many years. And I noted, for example, this session of the legislature this last week, we had a wonderful um, training session on ethics, um,
Mm,
sexual harassment, ethical behavior, um, using public resources. I introduced an ethics bill like 30 years ago, 25 or 30 years ago. And it really, we did a little bit each year of a little education, but this week we had one of the best sessions I've ever had. And I was thinking, it really is a delight to see how that has come about. So I would say occasionally you see things that you worked on years ago that now blossom. And that's really the challenge we all have of how do we maintain our energy and our support and our resources into something where you don't necessarily get immediate feedback. A social worker, for example, seeing a person who comes in crying but leaves feeling better and smiling, that sort of gives some immediate feedback. But working on a public policy about, should we have a mental health state hospital or not, you don't really get immediate feedback about that. That takes many, many years before you know, was this decision correct or not correct? And so I think that's important. If we can all get some feedback of things that we have done, but recognize it's not just the immediate part, it's in the long term to recognize some of those things. That's such a delight. And I am so blessed to every once in a while get a reminder of this thing worked now. You started out by mentioning our connection early on about Wellspring for the World. Well, we started out with a few folks and put in a few dollars, and now there's all kinds of wells being drilled in Africa.
Yeah.
And so that's a delight to see.
I love that answer. It helps me understand how in the world you can play the long game that you play in North Dakota politics. Not to make this a political conversation, but just to recognize the terrific challenge of a supermajority and of a often dichotomous way of viewing the world, and to just show up and consistently have the integrity that you bring to the table, knowing that that is a very uphill climb that you are making every other January, you and your colleagues. So that's a great reminder that you might not get the credit, but you might get to see the trees you planted as seeds generations ago.
Sure. And that's really one of the challenges we have now with term limits. I just hope that there are legislators who can see the importance of playing the long game and not just the short game.
Yeah.
Both are important.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Senator, I know you have a lot of other things to get to today. Thank you so much for your time, for your insight, for your measured and thoughtful answers. It is one of the things I value most in you when I am losing my mind and my head is spinning 360 degrees. You always say something to me, which makes me stop and think, all right, take a breath. It'll be all right. And I so value that in you.
Thank you. And happy birthday.
Thank you. Have a great, great Christmas season and best of luck in the new legislative session coming up. I will be thinking about you and sending support where I can.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you. Everyone else, I will see you tomorrow. Have an excellent day.